Hi, Thomas. How are you? Well, you are. Well, sir, you are going to get what you want. You might have me standing there advancing the screen for you because I can't do it remotely. It's not on PowerPoint. It's on Microsoft. But don't worry about it. If you don't mind me standing here advancing it. Well, as I am an untaken faculty member, you're free to use me. Yeah, I think we're just going to do it manually to save you any kind of complication. So you're up. You're good to go. You're loaded here. Well, no, that was lunch. Okay. Now, this is on. However, we also have wires like one here, and then I can just advance the script as you like.
I think we'll have that after for the question.
We definitely have that after for the questions. So for now, we'll just have you on this. So I will be your trusty sidekick. Well, then we don't need this. They just on the CD-ROM, and I just opened up the what you call it, Windows Photo Viewer. So we can play with the lights. Yeah, we can play with the lights because now I hope Orlando mentioned to you for being live stream. So we can play with the repository and yeah, come on up. So make sure it's right here. So in your Welcome, everyone. Please have a seat. And maybe focus on this end of the room since the screen is not working, unfortunately. Professor Jordan, welcome. Have you had the presentation? Oh, okay. Thank you for bringing your class. Thank you. Excellent. Guaranteed attendance with assignments. The power of the extra credit. Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's double space, right?
Oh my God. You got the assignment. You got the assignment?
What do you have right now? You're starting out with. Yeah, what you started out with. That's the high. That's the last one.
You move that camera to this area. Yeah. So how long will it take you to move? Just a second.
That would be right.
Al monte.
So
Al monte. Ah.
So
That's it.
the camera more on the artist and less on me. I have to stand here.
Collado.
So yeah,
Collado.
focus more. Try to keep the other picture is what I'm saying.
Amen. Florentino. Francisco. Gaston. Goga. Gomez. Gonzalez. Carol. Yeah. Johnson. Fortumata. Lago.
Are we good?
Haley. Mello. Corina.
Yeah, the last one.
Morales. Peace. All right, Eric. Harry. Reyes. Hermoso. Rosado. Rivera. Santo. Javier. Villa.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I want to welcome you all to our event today, the lecture by Eugenio Martorell, formerly entitled Artistic Representations of Eugenio de Hostos, but I think today there's a slight change in the title, which he will inform you of. Before I get to that, my name is Eugenio. I teach history here in the Behavioral and Social Sciences Department. I want to welcome you all. It's heartening to see the power of the extra credit that draws students out of the event. So, thank you for coming to have a nice, vibrant crowd. So, you may have been receiving a number of emails in your Hostos student accounts, as your faculty staff accounts, regarding Hostos 175. Some of you are new to college, so just briefly, what is it? In January of this year, it marked the 75th anniversary of the birth of the man our college is named after. And it became immediately clear to my co-coordinator, Professor Orlando Hernandez, in the Humanities Department, who has brought us class here today, that few of us knew who Eugenio de Hostos was. We knew the name. We had some idea of his ideas, especially as enunciated, as pointed out in our college mission. But beyond that, we didn't know. And the more Orlando talked about this with some of our faculty colleagues, we realized it was something not only the students needed to know, but our new faculty, myself included, staff, the entire community. And as a consequence, we've done a variety of things, and we will be publishing our full list of fall events in a day or so. So we've already had last year, last spring, and this semester, we have had guest lectures. Eugenio Martorell is our third guest lecturer. We're very pleased to have him here. We have also brought in students via a student essay writing contest on Hostos, and we'll be seeing reminders of that going out. And these are awards where the students not only receive recognition at honors convocation, but this also comes with a financial incentive or reward. So please look out for that email. You'll be getting the reminders. This semester, we are very pleased to have Student Leadership Academy coming in and organizing a debate on the annexation of Puerto Rico. We are very pleased to co-sponsor Voting Rights for Non-Citizens, an event organized by Hector Soto and Citizens Union. On November 13th and 14th, you'll be seeing all these details in a moment. We have all-day academic and cultural events celebrating Hostos the man and his era, including musical performances in the Rep Theater. We have a workshop, as we did last semester, teaching Hostos at Hostos. And we have student readings, where students are reading their own poetry, some of which are inspired by the work of Eugenio de Hostos himself. We are very pleased to announce also the play Young Hostos, which opens on November 20th at 7 p.m. in our newly renovated Black Box Theater, C151. And I believe the director, Professor Angel Morales, is with us here today. Thank you for all your hard work with the play Young Hostos. And at the end of the semester, we will be having an Hostos and Human Rights Struggle of yesterday and today, organized by Professor Angel Lopez. So it's a full semester. We're very pleased for all the cooperation we received from the Office of the President, the Office of Academic Affairs, Institutional Advancement, and Student Development and Enrollment Management. They've all been wonderful to work with. And with that, let me bring up our President, David Gomez, for some brief opening remarks. Thank you.
Let's go to the microphone before we pass. I don't want to delay the lecture because I think that's infinitely more important than anything I can say. What I'd like to leave you with this afternoon is the words of a very noted educational philosopher and theoretician who I had the pleasure of studying with when I was at Columbia. And Maxine Green said to us, as a group of young students, art cannot change the world. What it can do is change someone who will. And I think that's the power of art. In today's lecture, what you're going to be exposed to are both the art that will change the world, and will help you change the world, and someone who is the namesake of this institution, who did in a very real and tangible way. That is what this institution and this great artist is all about. So without further ado, I will leave it to our host to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, President Gomez. And now it is my distinct pleasure to invite up to the podium Professor Orlando Hernandez, my co-coordinator of Hostos 175.
Welcome, my students. We're working on the extra credit. Buenas tardes. Welcome everyone. Thank you for being here today. I want to be brief, but substantively a few remarks I will make about our friend and important collaborator, Martorell, who's one of the finest artists in the Hispanic world. When maybe about a year and something ago, we started to think about what will be events that could be some interest to the celebration and the commemoration of our namesake, Eugenio. We thought about options, and we felt very strongly that art has to be one important topics that one of the important disciplines that we would highlight in presenting also to students of the community. And of course, thinking about art, it leads us to make the very appropriate connection to a friend of Hostos, un amigo de Hostos, who has been with us for the last 20 years, 25 years. Antonio has been around coming to Hostos since the 80s, right? And I remember him when I was a young professor, and he was doing posters for the events that were taking place at Hostos Community College. So we have a sampling of those in the hallways next to the library. He did a few of those. So he's a friend of the college, and very important, and a strong, powerful, artistic persona who presents a point of view that matters throughout the Hispanic world, in our countries, in the Caribbean, and certainly in the United States. So we thought, then, why not invite Tonio to come to give us a talk on something that has not been yet the subject of academic discourse. You know, if you look at the Hostos bibliography, there will be probably a few thousand entries. And it's good to think that our namesake has generated that kind of interest and that kind of scholarly pursuit, right? But beyond that, there's nothing written about the way Hostos has been portrayed in our countries, in our society, in this society. And that's why we thought that perhaps we would have a unique opportunity to give us a viewpoint, privileged viewpoint on his on the portraiture of Hostos. Eugenio Maria de Hostos is one of the most richly portrayed 19th century intellectuals in contemporary Caribbean history. During his lifetime, only a handful of photographs were taken of Hostos, given his limited budget and non-conformity. You have to be important, even though photography was at that time the latest thing in. I'm talking about the 19th century, the last third of the 19th century. We don't have any photograph of Hostos in New York, for example, because number one, he was too poor, and number two, he was not important enough, and he was always rebellious, so he did not make it to the stands where they were taking pictures. But as he became a prominent educator, painters started to portray him. First in Chile, in the 90s, then in Santo Domingo in the early 1900s. The classical portrait of Hostos was painted by Puerto Rican artist Francisco Oyer in 1903 for Hostos' death. From that point on, Hostos' artistic presentations have become the mark of successive generations of artists from the Hispanic Caribbean. As these ideas were widely disseminated and gained traction throughout the 20th century, Hostos became an iconic figure that commanded the attention of intellectuals and artists alike. Antonio Martorell, one of the most distinguished artists in the Hispanic world, will give an illustrated talk, lecture on the rich portraiture and representation of Eugenio Maria de Hostos. In his talk, Maestro Martorell will explore the work of the major artists who have portrayed Hostos, their context, and the significant themes underlying the work. Maestro Antonio Martorell was born and raised in Puerto Rico. His prolific work has received wide international acclaim. He's an accomplished graphic artist, set designer, installation master, narrator, university professor, and journalist. Martorell explores the conjunction of various forms of artistic expression and the relationship of art to the viewer using witty, powerful, and engaging ways. In 2006, for example, Martorell was an artist in residence at Hostos Community College and created a permanent installation titled La Plena Inmortal, which can be seen in the foyer of the C building in this college. In 2010, he participated in the New York Historical Society and the Museo de Barrios joint exhibit in Nueva York, 1613 to 1945, with the installation La Guagua Aérea, and you may have heard the title, right? It's from Luis Rafael Sanchez's story, right? The Airboss, except he did it through an installation. And that installation centers on the Puerto Rican immigration experience. His most recent exhibit, Ima Laura, a retrospective of his work celebrating his 75th birthday, opened in April in Havana and has traveled to Mexico City and more recently to Madrid. We are very pleased and honored to have Maestro Antonio Martorell present us a lecture on Hostos by us. The title is Hostos by us.
Mucho gusto estar aquí. I always come back to it. And it's no surprise that this lecture is called Hostos by Us, because it is us, not only the artists, but us, the students, the professors, all of Latin Americans, and somewhere not Latin Americans, but who are people. And Hostos addresses us all. And that's my main concern here today. It's about ignorance and apprenticeship. And I began by quote that I used some time ago. And it begins like this: La ignorancia es el peor enemigo de la civilización. Ignorance is the worst enemy of civilization. This abbreviated statement of Hostosian creed is literally rendering 3 murals covering the walls of PS48, as you can see here, a Washington Heights primary school in Upper Manhattan. You must excuse me, I indulge myself by beginning this brief commentary on the iconography of Eugenio Maria de Hostos, showing my own work on this subject in this college that bears its name, because PS48 serves a community very much like this one, where a considerable part of the student body is Dominican or its descendants. And Hostos, as we all know, was born in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, but is buried with all the national honors in the Panteón Nacional de la República Dominicana in Santo Domingo. He made that country through his lifetime work, also his patria. It was in 1995 that I installed his murals titled The Children's ABC, due to the sad fact that the school was awarded the lowest rating in reading and writing abilities in all of Manhattan. For a whole year, I visited the school, photographed, drew, and eventually carved in wood and printed in colored fabrics an alphabet that showed students in their favorite pastimes, such as games, sports, dance, or just using single or in groups configuring letters. My aim was literally to incorporate the student to a world of letters so far hostile it was unknown, alien to them, cultural and linguistic differences. By incorporating, I mean, in Spanish, incorporando, que la letra fuera su cuerpo y que su cuerpo fuera la letra. Una identificación plena, absoluta, tangible. The original wood plates of these prints are also exhibited permanently in the back wall of the auditorium. Up, down, around the clock, snake-like, measuring both the time and space of the children's apprenticeship. The ABC was inaugurated with a performance by the students dancing and singing the popular song Hero, waving the printed flags, starting with the letter H of Hero and Hostos. The performance was directed by the dancer and choreographer Alejandra Martorell, Michael. Keep it in the family. I couldn't resist starting with these images of Hostos, where Dominicans and Puerto Ricans, artists and students, children and adults made it all possible. Both the Hostosian and Betansian ideals of Antillean unity became then a living, playful, and learning reality not that distant from the revolutionary tradition fostered in the late 19th century in this very city of New York. And now that I mentioned Betances, Ramón Emeterio Betances, I recall a concern that I must share with you. Before beginning to research images of Hostos, I had the notion that he had not traveled well in time. So I told my good friend Orlando that his image had not fared as well as Betances, and was asking myself, why? Now I am convinced that it is not so. Both Betances and Hostos, together or singly, have received due recognition and transformation by our artists. Both their words and their images have stood well the changes in time and space. After all, this is Hostos by us. About 10 years ago, I showed a selection of images of Betances at Hunter College, and I titled that Imagining Betances. When my good friend Professor Orlando Hernandez invited me to do something similar with Hostos, I deemed it appropriate to do it in a comparative way, pointing out both the similarities and differences of these founding fathers and how they are pictured as time goes by and when it stands still. Since these founding fathers of our founding nation are unfortunately best known by their holidays, street signs, or public buildings, if at all. How have these images evolved in drawings, paintings, sculptures, and prints? Could a map be drawn of the travels in time and space, their origin and destiny? What perception have we provoked by these images? Big, very big questions, and a short time for an illustrated talk, or should we say, commented icons in an academic form. But to begin with, how do you imagine what you don't know? A name, a face, a date, a place, an absence of something that was never there to begin with? Growing up in Puerto Rico in the 1940s was not growing up in Puerto Rico. By then, the American dream was in our DNA before the DNA was known as such. We didn't dream it. It dreamt us. We were born in Puerto Rico, but we were taught that everything Puerto Rico was small, poor, weak, and ignorant. And ignorant we were about ourselves, not about the idealist image of the American we were destined and privileged to become. It might sound strange to those of you who were born in the 70s or 80s, later, or even before, because in the diaspora, it was necessary in order to survive, to hang on to meaningful icons of the Puerto Rican identities that were so embattled in this side of the ocean. Over there, in Puerto Rico, we have never considered ourselves minorities because we are not. And being a majority, we take for granted what has not been granted, what has quite the contrary been systematically taken away. Let's take Hostos, the painter, Hostos, the philosopher, Hostos, the lawyer, Hostos, the writer, the abolitionist, the teacher. They are all absolutely unknown to me. So was Betances the revolutionary, Betances the physician, Betances the writer, the abolitionist. They were, at best, names, blurred images, bearded ghosts. I did have a clear, crisp, green dollar image of George Washington. Yes. I did have a colorful Sunday funnies image of Dick Tracy. Yes. And Abraham Lincoln switched places with Captain Marvel as I surreptitiously switched my textbooks because I was more interested in reading sitting in the back row at school. But Puerto Rican history, what was salvaged from it, was reduced to such a small subject of our study that it always, curiously, struck at the turn of the 20th century with what was euphemistically called el cambio de soberanía, literally change of sovereignty, as if it had been a courteous and generous exchange of handsome hats, while it was an armed invasion with the result of the island displacement from the agonizing Spanish colonial power to the armed arms of the newly rising empire, the United States of America, that in its very name bore its extra-continental and all-encompassing colonial ambition. So, at most, Betances and Hostos were then reduced to one of many faces in an old portrait in sepia tones of stern-faced, bearded men wearing long coats and eyes that stared at a distant future like they never actually witnessed, from which they stared unknowingly back at them. A face, a beard, a name, 2 days, of birth and death, bracketed, conveniently sequestered from history between 2 centuries. No more and no less. It took a long apprenticeship in art, colonial rule, and the politics of survival to come again face to face with Hostos and Betances, to learn who they were, what they meant when Hostos said as portrayed by Lorenzo. Los pueblos deben consagrar sus grandes natalicios, no tanto a regocijarse cuanto a examinarse, no tanto enorgullecerse cuanto estimularse, no tanto a hincharse de vanidad cuanto a robustecerse de conciencia. Right here, splendid woodcut by Lorenzo Mara, our maestro, and we're celebrating a centenary this year. And translated very freely into English. All nations should consecrate their great birthdays, not so much to rejoice, but to examine themselves. Not so much to take pride in them, but to encourage themselves. Not so much to grow in vanity, but to strengthen their conscience. And when Betances proclaimed in my 1969 silkscreen poster, no quiero colonia ni con España ni con Estados Unidos. ¿Qué hacen los puertorriqueños que no se rebelan? I don't want colonial rule neither with Spain nor the United States. Why are the Puerto Ricans rebelling? It's in his unfurled flag-like profile, a storm-tossed sea growing in time. Early images of Hostos in 3 dimensions, like the Victoria Machos monument at the UPR University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras campus, have a graveyard stance to them. They inspire silence, introspection. They have a mourning aura about them, stillness in time. Maybe it has to do with our view of the philosopher, the thinker, immersed in eternal wisdom. But beware, the many and fruitful ideas stemming from Hostos take flight and playfully do a balancing act on his arms and head, as if he's juggling thoughts in spite of the heavy bones in which they are cast in Jose Buscaglia's monument at Valleja, San Juan. At first, when I saw this statue, I said, what does it have to do with Hostos? It's very funny. I mean, what is it? Is it an acrobat or is it a philosopher? Then I thought back of it and said, well, after all, his ideas, at least the ideas of any thinker, go beyond it. They grow. And here you have a very muscular Hostos juggling people, like juggling his ideas and forming in a very playful fashion. Since elsewhere I have devoted substantial time to the dance figures, I will now focus mainly on Hostos with brief references to the dances where it is pertinent. The idea of pilgrimage is identified early on with Hostos as in La Peregrinación de Bayoán. In contrast with the dances, more frequent travels to Europe, the Antilles, and New York, Hostos was predominant, although not exclusively, southbound to South America. Even, he came to the US, went to Europe, but he had a keen interest in South America, where he left a great legacy. His own travels have given artists visual material developed in woodcut by Graciela Azcárate in El Barco de Papel, with fanciful images given both to children and adult readers. Hostos, the incessant travel, never returns. Often the exile is associated with sea and sky, as in Jesus Cardona's poster commemorating the thinker's death centenary. Here, we envision Hostos as a floating, seafaring island between sea and sky, flag-like, peopled by playful children. The exploring Hostos between here and there, moving forward and looking backwards, not sadly, but whimsically, defiant of the surrounding train that unsuccessfully tries to limit this horizon. Hostos, both moving and still, a brief pause in an otherwise windy seascape. Isn't this image a prophetic view of our neighboring selves, ever changing and ever the same? Migrant Hostos, our nation's sea lies in mid-air, like Luis Rafael Sanchez Guavaria, at home at sea, forever landing, always departing, airborne and grounded. Special attention deserves Jose Ramon Alicea, whose devotion to Hostos writings becoming memorable images is unsurpassed in our iconography. Hostos speaks, screams, whispers, but is never silent in Alicea's forceful mixed media on wood rendering homage to the philosopher titled Aforismos. Commissioned for the Museo y Centro de Usos Múltiples Eugenio de Hostos in la cabeza. The title themselves serve as a guide to both the creed of Hostos and Alicea that appropriates them eloquently. In the first one, you can see si vivir es realizarse, if living is becoming, and then the point of Hostos thinking. The second, al modo de las estrellas, matter, manner of the stars. In the third one, amamos la patria, we love our country. And then, vale más morir luchando. Venga de la cruz, it's worth to die fighting. And then, un solo hombre, a single man. Tengo el deber, I have a duty. It's the next one. Los momentos pasan. Moments go by. One of these is particularly pertinent to this college. El corazón se educa. I think we have to go back. El corazón is the one that go back. This. El corazón se educa por el corazón, por la reflexión, por el ejemplo, por la noción de la realidad que da la vida, por la noción de lo bello que da el arte, por la noción de la virtud que da el conocimiento de lo justo. The heart is educated by the heart, by reflection, by example, by the notion of reality and life itself, by the notion of beauty that comes from art, by the notion of virtue that comes from the knowledge of what is just. And then Alicea continues quoting Hostos. No es patria el lugar donde nacemos si nos quitan el derecho de servirla, si entregan su felicidad a los que la desdeñan, si nos niegan la posesión de lo que es nuestro. Fatherland is not the place where we are born if the right to serve it is taken from us, if our happiness is given to those who disdain it, if they take away from us that which is ours. It is not by chance that the patrician face of Hostos is cameo-like shown with a framed background, a vertical rectangle akin to a flag and the text incorporating the colors of both the Puerto Rican and the Dominican flags, but no less meaningful, those of the United States, so often usurping the rights of our people. But then, also, Hostos is portrayed in a commemorative plate or directly inviting us with food for thought. It seems that Hostos is always resisting being framed, enclosed, denied breathing space, as in Elizabeth Escobar's portrait for Melinda Garcia's Teatros Oceanos. Escobar, himself a political prisoner for almost 20 years in U.S. prisons, portrays Hostos emerging from a frame window. But that not being enough, his forehead opens up and we see right through it into the wide blue yonder with his paper boat sailing and displaying our national emblem above. Now, Leonel Ojeda transcribes Hostos' thoughts and portrays him on a white feather. That single and now grounded evidence of a flight that is both souvenir, reminder, and promise of the power of ideas that defy oppression once they are put down in writing and travel freely and widely. An echo of Lorenzo Mar's early woodcut is the windswept visage of Hostos in José Peláez's interpretation. Una vida no es fuerte sino cuando se ha consagrado a conquistar su patria, por sencillo que sea. Life is not strong if it's not consecrated to conquer this ideal, no matter how simple it may be. And then Pablo Macano paints Hostos as part of a leafy landscape seen through a stained glass window. A plantain leaf hovering over his head in a not-so-vague reference to La Mancha de Plátano, the stain of the plantain as ascribed to all Puerto Ricans. Hostos' concern with the role of women in society is evident in the drawing of Bárbara Bosch Eugenio of a publication by Chiqui Vicioso in the Dominican Republic. Unfortunately, I haven't had access to the Hostosian iconography in that country that could very well deserve a whole new study. Not only books have benefited from Hostos' salutary influence, the Instituto de Cultura has done a valuable addition to this iconography by publishing the ICP comics under the graphic direction of Paco Lopez. History in lowercase subverts the comic book format into a learning tool, but still being entertaining. The silk screen by Luis Alonso in severe black and white shows a young Hostos focusing on his eyes, nose, and beard. In this variation of the fine borders, the artist erases the borders of the face itself. The outline blown away, we're forced to look head-on. A direct confrontation is with Hostos, who, however, shifts his gaze away from ours, thus once again escaping total apprehension. The text underneath points out the impossibility of an equation or the very precise conditions are established. It reads, sin igualdad civil, sin libertad política no hay dignidad. Sin dignidad no hay vida. Without civil equality, without political freedom, there is no dignity. Without dignity, there is no life. While Luis Alonso's border Hostos shifts his gaze away from us, Lorenzo Marc does something similar, but in a completely different manner. Both portraits are in black and white, but Omar's is predominantly gray, as the older Hostos sitting in a self-contained attitude, both hands gently but firmly held together, defies intrusion in the thinker's interior. His darkened face deep in thought, his white shirt ablaze with interior light like a bulletproof metal vest. Letter H, mute in Spanish when at the beginning of a word, is an essential letter in the anterior geography. A recent graphic portfolio, I honor our men and women on letters display with a selection of the writings across the Caribbean Sea. Hostos, his face and writing stands between the G of Jose Luis González and the I of Pedro Mil. Our good friend and maestro, Luis González, son of a Dominican mother and a Puerto Rican father, embraces with the Dominican poet Pedro Mil the Hostosian ideal of Antillean unity. Hostos Itinerante is the title of this sculptural group in bronze and aluminum created by Omar Ortiz, standing at the entrance of the Centro de Uso Múltiple en Romería de Hostos in Paraguay. Hostos appears at the center of a fountain, placing small paper boats cast in bronze that are given to him by a boy and girl. The boats are attached to the coastline of South America and the Caribbean, where his restless word and thought left its mark. The map itself is a spiral folding around the group, half protecting, half supported by their action. The continent itself, a void waiting to be filled with meaning, expecting, still expecting. This empty continental silhouette stands comparison with my own depiction of Betances and his 10 Commandments of Freedom, a silkscreen poster printed 4 decades earlier. In Ortiz culture, the void is marked by hopes, the landing of education as a vessel for freedom. In the poster, the map of South America is the bearded profile of Betances looking towards the east, to Africa and Europe, where many of our people, together with enslaving and liberating ideas, came from. The heart of the continent bears the 10 Commandments that read as follows in English: the abolition of slavery, the right to veto taxes, freedom of faith, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of trade, freedom to assemble, freedom to bear arms, inviolability of citizens, and the right to elect our own authorities. These 10 Commandments, more than an enumeration of or catalog of sins, is a declaration of power, a bill of rights. Some of these freedoms are still to be obtained. Some we thought we already had, but in the present state of affairs and the Patriot Act being enforced, they remain a dream, turning more and more into a nightmare. Betances and Hostos. Hostos and Betances. 10 commandments, 10 rights, and so many wrongs. A void to be filled, a landing to be completed, an education and freedom to be achieved. Both Betances and Hostos showed us the way. Both point to education as the main tool of freedom, the iron hand that spells out truth, not one, but many, ever-changing and everlasting truth. Now, if we take Hostos in his own words, words that are very pertinent to this very institution, Hostos Community College, we must listen when he says, la verdadera gloria de los maestros excelentes está en tener discípulos distantes. The true glory of great teachers lies in having distant disciples. Certainly, Hostos does not mean distant in neither space nor time. A great teacher that he was and is, what he means is to teach process more than product, not a truth, but ways to access it. Disciplines of thought and feeling that may lead us far from the teacher and nearer to us. Hostos by us. I would like to, in the future, create an image of Hostos reflecting that transcendental thought. But I cannot close this talk without referring to someone who has paid dearly for the following the path of freedom spelled out by these two great men, Hostos and Betances. He really has made Hostos his very own. He has spent the last 33 years in the longest incarceration of any political prisoner in America. You know his name, Oscar Lopez Rivera. Both Betances and Hostos would have been proud of him. He is a free man, but he must be released from prison. Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. As we hope, and he is indeed a friend of our college and a friend of all of us, of ours.
Allow me to interrupt you. The one reason why I like to be called Antonio instead of Don Antonio, which I hate, or Antonio, because my grandfather, my father, all those Antonios were historically too much in me. But Antonio best because it sounds like Antonio. Anyone who says something like that, Antonio, I feel
So I, as you can see, Antonio is really Antonio, but Antonio has the rebelliousness of Hostos, and I think that he has given us a wonderful talk today, which is to stimulate our thinking and to really establish, start to have dialogue. Antonio will be happy to entertain questions and comments from all of you. No, but those of you who might be interested. We're very happy to establish now the question and answer session. Please be our guest.
I insist because I could talk here till tomorrow at the same time. I would be house, fed, and everything else according to tomorrow to that time. But I would be saying things that not necessarily would be of your interest. So please don't be shy. You can ask me anything. I will answer every question regardless. Not necessarily with the truth, but it'd be worth the while.
So let me walk around with the microphone. Can I see Tanix who'd like to ask a question?
Yes.
And please, after you ask your question, just drop the microphone. I'll find the next person.
Quisiera saber si todavía lo persigue el fuego.
Fuego.
Ajá.
The friend asked if still persecutor followed by fire. Yes, well, sometimes fire is before me, sometimes fire is behind me, like they burned my house. I have several houses being burned, but the fire is always in me. And that's the important part.
My question is, at what stage were you inspired by the great man there, Hostos?
It took a long time because I didn't learn about him very early on. I was totally ignorant about Hostos, like most of my generation and even other generations. I have learned of Hostos, I have learned about the dances, about Atisu, about all our great men and women. As time went by, or actually as time stopped me on my feet and sometimes on my knees. I learned by force. I learned by reading, by listening, and by watching, especially in the And I believe my stay at Hostos Community College will have quite a few. I have been at Hostos College for at least 4 seasons on and off. The first one was when I had a show in Hostos back in the 80s. And then I came back, I did Blancacio in Puerto Rico. And I also participated in the inauguration of the Gallery of Hostos, the Islands show. And then again with La Plena Immortal. And also I collaborated with Hostos repertories with Pablo Cabrera and many students there also, like Maria Soledad Romero in that venue. So I have learned Hostos through the work itself. I mean, it's been learning in the process. Maybe that's a very Hostosian way of learning, because one thing that I do more research into Hostos, I think the great educator he was, he meant to teach us how to think, how to find out how to do it. And I think that's the best. I always shy away from thoughts that are like cutting stone. No, it's better for them to be sculpted in clay that's more malleable, that can change as life itself changes. And Hostos thought to me is the guide to that, to be quest for not one to be, or to study all the time and with experience. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. Several times throughout the lecture you used the word icon, and I just wondered if you could clarify what you meant by that, and also what you as an artist might see as the relationship between iconography and fantasy. Fantasy, because you mentioned also, you know, we have so few images, and if each one is iconic, there seems to be a relationship there between, you know, kind of symbolic representation and then things that you said that don't exist.
Well, it's an image. I'm referring to items as of Hostos, and image of always involves fantasy, whether we like it or not, whether we intend it or not. And I've seen that in my own work and the work of my fellow artists. Whenever we portray anybody, there's always something in that somebody that resembles very much our own selves and looks. Like take my maestro Lorenzo, who's celebrating cemetery. Whenever you see a picture of anyone by Omar, if you watch the hands, they are Omar's hands. Oh, who was a pantomime. He had a way flexing his finger, a way that was very much happy between a flamenco dancer and acrobat. He was always kind of jumping. He's not actually himself, he was an acrobat. Hands did the jumping for him. And fantasy is always there, and the resemblance. Icon is not something stable. It always changes.
I have a question. So,
Identify yourself so we can get to know each other. Yeah. Wait, tell us who you are.
excuse me, so I'm Eric, but I want to know how can any aspect of the life of philosophy of Hostos applied to the study of criminal justice? You can answer that.
You mean, wait, you mean criminal justice, the discipline of criminal justice, or when justice is criminal? Which is unfortunate in many times.
Just in general.
Well, I think that anyone who believes in the positive opportunity, anyone who believes in the rights of women, anyone who believes that a human being deserves respect is dealing also with criminal justice in a way, because the worst crime is done many times by justice when it is unjust.
Thank you very much. My name is Antonio Diaz, friend of the artist here. Thank you. One question, it has to do actually with this last question. Hostos, like the dances, was also a radical abolitionist against slavery, and it hasn't to do with criminal justice. I don't know what has to do with criminal justice. My question, however, is implicitly, but not explicitly, you are very modest, as we know. I think you did not state something that I consider important, and I'd like you to say a few words about it. Maybe schools in the public system in Puerto Rico and the private too, education in general, and has committed a crime in the sense of education to forget it and to erase these important founding figures, men and women. But what strikes me is the role of artists and writers in creating a memory that goes against, let's say, the state ideology and the public education system. And you have shown here a richness that again brings that to mind. The role of artists and writers, including of course yourself, in creating a memory, a public memory, a visual memory, when there is very little elsewhere in the schools. Could you comment on that and your own vocation for that and Puerto Rican artists?
Well, the whole talk is titled Hostos by Us. I did refer to us, but in a very muted way, like that silent age Hostos. And my own education, my most important education is in art and in literature. I was taught, or I should say I learned through question and answers. And not all the answers, not the questions were put in a logical way. Art has a literature. The world, the path of imagination, which is nothing else but imagining, making images, defies reason. I have worked backwards. I didn't go from the historical data and the explicit thoughts of the great thinkers. I kind of searched for the image, knowing because of my maestros taught me to do it. The assets of the images, and we need to create them. So many of our images are not true to life at all. They're not true to history. And this goes back to the question of but then art is not that we falsify truth. We construct another truth, an alternative truth, a truth that is according to our needs. And that's part of apprenticeship, and that's part of the teaching profession, which is what this center. I think more when we. Yes.
Hi, Eugenio. I have a question for you.
Did you hit yourself?
No. I have a question for you. As a Puerto Rican and as an artist, two questions actually. What's the artist that have shaped you as an artist? And what is your point of view in the ideal world? What do you want to see for your land, for your people? Like obviously, Hostos fought for independence. If you wanted to have Puerto Rico free, so in your ideal world, what would you like to see for the land of Puerto Rico?
Well, to the first part of your sentence, very extended question. I want to fill it in an abbreviated way. I learned from my teachers to do meaningful art, significant art that is needed. I learned from the questions, not necessarily the answers. I still don't have the answers. But one thing I learned very quickly is that there's no art without freedom. The exercise of art is an exercise always of freedom, of daring, defy your own ignorance, to jump into the void, to take the risk. And the risks are more and more as we go on, both as artists and as part of a nation. Granada, Puerto Rico is a one of many crossroads. Very difficult time economically, politically. So I look at it like a picture that is half done. Let's complete the picture. And a good friend of mine, an artist, once told me, I was doing a painting, I was doubting whether to put in a color or not. I said, you know, I would like to put an orange over there next to that green, but I don't know if it will work. So I go ahead. What's stopping you? Put the fucking orange there. And I said, it isn't gonna bite you. And if it doesn't work, you're not gonna always erase it or paint on top of it. That's the Now, one thing we have in Puerto Rico is fear. It is that just the possibility of independence makes us worry that the whole island would sink, would disappear, drowned by the sea, not of horror, but of ignorance, out of fear. And that's, I think art is a very good apprenticeship for freedom. Without freedom, there is no art.
Maybe one or two more questions? Claudia, did you want
Hello, my name is Rick. I work in the office at the college, and I wanted to know if you have permission to do a work on Hostos now. What themes would you incorporate? Maybe what mediums would you use? Or what is your vision artistically of what it would look like?
Certainly, I would incorporate image and words because it's impossible not to do so when you deal with a thinker, a philosopher, a writer. And I would make it as all-encompassing as possible, knowing that Hostos' thought and his action had to do with a whole picture, not just Puerto Rico, not just the Antilles, not even just Latin America, the world. I mean, it would be the building up of freedom through education, of art free of fear. Look at it's all in Hostos. It's there all the time. You can read it on and off. In one way or the other, he's always saying it. And his life is a living and dying proof of it. And I would love to do it. I love commissions. But, make it soon. I'm already 75. I act as if I was important, but I know I'm not.
Okay, now, here's our final question right here.
Hello. What did La Pena Inmortal mean to you? How do you relate that to us?
Oh, I love dancing. I love dancing, and La Plena is an epic, comic epic, at times dramatic epic that you dance to. It's song and dance, and it's lively, it's celebratory, it's accusatory. It deals with everything and everybody. It knows no limits, and I love that. And it has a long tradition. Medieval Europe, Mexico, Puerto Rico, it's facing life with death, which is its natural end, and which is an essential part of life. Cervantes, amongst his many writers, said, hasta la muerte todo es vida. It can be translated as, even death is life. So death is a great theme, and associating it with fun, with colors, with dancing, with celebration, which is also very Mexico. And I lived in Mexico for 6 years, and I love that country. It took me years to do that, and I loved it. I loved doing it. And it was great doing it here, and it's great to see hanging, standing there. You can step on it, you can dance to it, you can look at it. Somebody went down and used over $1 bill that was there, so yeah.
Today, we would thank you for coming. We will have a full semester worth of events and activities. Please join us in the next activities we'll have. I want to remind my students that we're meeting now, the second part of the class. Please come to the classroom. And for all of you, please come back to us.
Be on the lookout for posters across the college and in your email inboxes. Do not delete.
We can continue the conversation with the artists and